Todd, let me turn back to you to talk about the KPIs that companies need to measure. We do have a slide for this.
Yeah, so this is kind of getting in the forgiveness, the calculator, how the intricacies work. You know, so there's eligible costs that we talked about: payroll, utilities, mortgage interest, you know, and rent. And then, you know, however, payroll has to be a certain percentage of those. So 75% is thrown out. And this is one of the areas that Chris mentions where it's in one place it says 75% of payroll or the loan proceeds, and another place it says 25% of, you know, forgiven. So it depends how you read some of these rules. You know, so you also have to look at your percentage of how you paid people. There's a 25% rule where if you reduce someone's salary more than 25%, your loan forgiveness goes down. So that's a big area that's gonna be hard to track. You know, you're looking at the covered period. We even talked about this February 15th through June 30th timeline. Well, then there's the 8-week covered period from when you get the loan. So in theory, when you get your loan, you have 8 weeks to use the proceeds that are forgiven. Well, what if you get your loan on May 15th? Do you have 8 weeks or do you have till June 30th? So that's a open question that's got to be out there. And then there's the question of full-time equivalents. How are you going to calculate it? Is it under ACA? Is it under some new rule they're going to come out with? So there's a lot of these things that you have to track. And even the employees, you have to go back to 19 to determine what your FTEs were compared to early 2020, then compare that to what you actually paid and determine some ratios. So there's a lot of calculators out there that you need to do. And I think when those regulations come out, we'll get some clarification. And I think we're on version 10 of our calculator as we keep refining it and coming out with new interpretations. So I envision if you downloaded a calculator from someone 2 weeks ago, make sure you have an accurate one when you go through your forgiveness. We're kind of working with some people weekly to make sure that's updated.
Yeah, and those calculators are being informed by specific fact patterns that arise. And, you know, we've commented on some spreadsheets and proposed some formulas, those of us, not me necessarily, I'm basic, but some, you know, with if-then logic chains. And, you know, like one question that comes up, I'm pretty comfortable giving advice that, you know, you at least have 8 weeks to spend the money. I followed this legislation as the sausage was being made, and I could see places where there was at one time the covered period was in the Senate legislation, January 1st to December 31st. Then it got shortened to be February 15th to June 30th. Then they bifurcated it, and I think properly so for forgiveness, because in theory, under the law, one could get a loan all the way up till June 30th, putting aside the issue of whether or not money runs out. So if you got your loan on June 30th, there's no way they expected you to spend the money 4 hours later. And so they gave the 8-week period. So I think you have that 8-week period to spend the money. The question that is arising is, well, what if you don't spend it during the 8-week period? Does that only impact your forgiveness, or does that impact your ability to even use the loan? Because the other part of the CARES Act, where they defined covered period as by June 30th, there's a lot of mismatches. And I think there's going to be some technical fixes to the legislation that we're guessing on. I think it's going to be informed somewhat by SBA's guidance and Treasury's guidance that they publish on this. But I think there are some basic principles one can adhere to. We know that you're going to have to spend at least 75% of your loan proceeds on payroll. That's something that they want you to do. There is some question as to, well, what if you only spend 60% on it? Does that just mean the rest is not forgivable? There are some open questions there. Some people have asked, well, but my business isn't open. The answer is it doesn't matter. The idea is to just pay people. And we're running into some practical challenges where some people who have been furloughed, were laid off, that are on unemployment, are actually not doing so badly with the extra $600 a week that they were getting. And some have said, don't ask me to come back, come see me in August. And that's putting employers in a really tight spot, because in some states they're supposed to report people who turn down a job, if you will. And it's creating some tensions out there.